My name is Bob Chase, and I'm a professional cabinet maker. And I want to show you just briefly some of the things I do. I do kitchen cabinets, and I do light construction on houses and that. And I've done that for many years, and I have a lot of experience in table saws, especially shop-type table saws or the job site table saws. And I've converted my table saws over to this new way with the small blades about 15 years ago. "15 years ago, my wife was working as a nurse at the third shift, so I decided to do something other than watching TV and that, so I started making these models here. And this is a USS Constitution. There's a lot of time involved in it, but there's a lot of intricate tying knots and everything like that. But the biggest thing is I had to make all these boards, strip boards. So I had to cut out a lot of different strips like this here. And you think most of your saws have a 10-inch blade on. Well, that's such a big blade you couldn't do anything with. So I figured I couldn't buy a small saw for it. So I just took my regular cabinet saw and put a 7 1/4-inch blade on, a real thin blade, and bingo, here I was able to cut all these strips out. So this is what this whole DVD is about, trying to get people to take that big, ugly 10-inch blade off of there and put a small blade on there, which you can cut up 1.5 inches, and you can do all your cutting on there. Much cheaper, much finer, and it's easier than a saw, easier on everything, and it's a lot safer. Okay, now I'm going to really show you what I meant when I said taming your table saw. First of all, you're going to take the 10-inch blade off and put this 7 1/4-inch blade on it. Here's a 10-inch blade. Now that's just way too big for any type of cabinet saw because you never need that. It weighs 1.5 pounds, and that's just like a big flywheel flying around, especially on these job site saws. They're very small, and they're not really made for a saw like this. And that thing weighs 1.5 pounds, and it cuts 3 inches thick. And when do you ever need a 3-inch cut 3 inches? And if you try to cut 3 inches on a job site saw, the motor is just not powerful enough to pull that saw through the width of cut and everything. So we're going to switch it over to a 7 1/4-inch smaller saw blade here, which will still cut 1.75 inches, and it only weighs 6.5 ounces. It's a very friendly, user-friendly saw. This one here is like a wicked monster up there, you know. Now I'm going to show you, demonstrate right now the difference between this saw and this saw on a table saw. Okay, I just put these two blades together like this on here just to give you an idea just how much bigger this blade is and all that extra blade on here. It's like a but still, either one of these will cut through a 2x4. And so if you're going to cut through a 2x4 with this, why would you ever want that big blade on there? I just don't understand. And it's dangerous because it's a big, wicked blade. And job site saws, those motors, if you try to cut something 3 inches thick, that motor's not going to last very long because you're just not going to pull it because you're cutting a lot of wood and making a lot of sawdust. So that's why the 7 1/4 is by far the best blade for that. And I've used them for probably 15, maybe 20 years now, all these small blades, and they've worked for every type of cabinet I've ever wanted to make. Because I can't think of one time you would have to cut thicker than 1.5 inches, and if you did, you can always put this blade on for that one cut. Okay, now I want to show you the difference in the cut on this saw and this saw. Here's a sample here. This saw cut an 1/8 inch cut through there. This saw will cut 1/16 inch cut. This saw will create twice as much sawdust. This saw would be a 16-inch kerf. It's going to cut faster and smoother than this one. And it takes a lot more power to push this through. It takes about twice the power. I checked it out to amps. This one takes about 12 to 15 amps to go through a 2x4. This one takes about 5 to 6 amps going through there. So this motor on the saw like this is going to last you a lot longer. I went and visited a friend of mine a while ago, and he had just got a nice table saw like this, a little Ryobi. It was a real nice saw, but he had this monster blade on here. This is a wicked looking blade for a little saw like that. The blade takes up a bigger part of the saw, And he said, well, I tried to cut a 2x4 with it and it just scares me. And I said, well, let's take the blade off. We put this blade here on there, and it's been working perfect. He's doing all kinds of projects with it, and it's very user-friendly. It cuts so nice and smooth. It's small. You're not afraid of it. And then I went back there a week later, saw and found out that he had made all kinds of fancy woodwork cutting with that small saw. And yet, before that, he was afraid of the saw. And I don't blame him, because that big saw is not very user-friendly. It's just an ugly saw spinning around, and it's so heavy that it's like a flywheel. It just keeps on spinning. Well, you notice that we're in a different location now, and the reason for that is because this is a table saw that my friend got that he was so afraid of to turn the thing on. So we took the blade off and put the 10-inch blade off and put this 7¼ inch blade on here, and it's been working real nice. So I just thought I'd come over here and demonstrate all my different cuts on here on this particular saw. Okay, and the first thing we needed was an outfeed table on it. So what I did is I just made a table here. It's just a regular table. So when I want to use it, I just pull it up here to the saw here and bring it right up here, and just take a couple of these snap clamps and clamp it on. That way, when we don't need if we want just a table or not using a saw for a long time, we just take the table off and use a table. It makes it much more versatile that way. So I'm going to start making several different cuts, but the whole object of this is table saw safety. Prevent accidents. We don't want any accident, any cut fingers. I've been operating table saws for pretty close to 70 years, and I still have all my fingers, and I want everybody else to keep their fingers as long as they can. So it needs to be all safety measures on this. The most dangerous part of a table saw, the most dangerous accidents, is from kickbacks. They say about 90% of the table saw accidents are kickbacks, and they can happen so fast and so rapidly that you can't even expect them. So I'm going to try to show you how to prevent any of those. Okay, the best safety device, of course, is your safety glasses, and you should wear those at all times because sawdust and everything gets in your eyes. Ear plugs are a good idea. I don't use them. This saw doesn't make that much noise right here. Okay, now one of the things most people, they want to cut little blocks like this. They'll go and put it in here, you know. You never want to do that because there's no way of getting that block through there straight enough. It'll catch here and throw up at you. And I heard about a guy that a block came at him so fast. I think he had a 10-inch blade on there. It hit so hard, he actually killed him here. And I can remember in high school, in our woodworking school in high school, some of the kids weren't very nice, but they would turn their saw on and stand on that side of it there and throw blocks in there. Those blocks would go clean across that classroom, hit that wall so hard. Some people figure they go about close to 100 miles an hour, and something like that coming back and hitting you, it's very serious. If you go on Google and look up table saw safety and look under table saw kickbacks, and you'll find some horrible accidents there, you know, which all could be preventable. So I'm going to try to teach you how to prevent them. So you never go like this. If you want to cut some blocks like this, I'll show you how. So if you want to cut a bunch of blocks off, real short ones like this, measure over from your blade to here, and bring that back to here, clamp it down, and put a clamp on here. Then you take your miter gauge, put it on here, and you take your block, and you can come up here with your, right up to there. You got plenty of room for your hand here. You're not going to get anything. So you can get that block and get it out of there right away. Get it out of there, because if it hits over here, that's what throws it back. But these small saws don't have anywhere near the power to really throw that thing back as a large saw would, but they still will throw it back. You should never do that. So this way you can take it away right away, and the next one just take it away, and it works very, very easy that way. It's the safest way to doing it. Okay, now this is another one. There's a lot of temptation. You got a block like this and you want to cut this here, but don't ever go through like that, because it gets here and it can, about that point, it can turn that thing around because it's so short and throw it right at you. And I've seen people on YouTube try to demonstrate this kickback, but don't ever try to demonstrate it. Who wants to do that? Because you can get hurt that way, because it'll throw right back at you like that. If you want to cut so I just want to cut a 1/2 inch off of this saw. So then I just come over here and set my rip fence a 1/2 inch. I put it in there. Okay, a push stick. I always had that push stick ready. This one's on a string, so it can't get too far away. But you have your push stick so you got enough room here to hold. So you want some way of not only pushing it, but you want to still hold that down a ways. Because once that starts coming up, that's just gets dangerous. Okay, now with a long board like this, then it's not really a problem. Now if you notice, as I pushed it through, I was able to hold it down real good here. I had a lot of room, and then there's enough board there so I could hold it in the back there. And that's not a problem, but a short one like that will twist on you real fast. Okay, now I want to show you what's called timber bind. It happens very, very seldom, but when it happens, it can be serious. Now I couldn't make one work, so I just bolted it here, because that will give you an idea when you're going through the saw like that, it starts tightening up here. And it can tighten up pretty fast. Now if you have a 10-inch blade on there with an 1/8 inch cut, it can be quite serious, but a smaller blade like this, it usually goes right straight through and you don't even notice it. I just had one the other day like that. I just kept cutting it, it tightened up, but it only tightened up a little bit because it's only a 16th inch cut here instead of a 1/4 inch cut. So, but if you see a timber bind come up or something, for crying out loud, just shut the saw off. And then you can just back up and cut again, but just shut the saw off as fast as you can. But I doubt if you'll ever, it's just some bad wood. The way the grain in the wood goes is what causes it. Okay, the thing I see wrong, well, it's not wrong, but the way they make these saws, they got this saw insert. It's stationary, you can't move it, but it's got that big gap in there. It's about it's a little bigger than a quarter, almost 5/16 right on each side there, and pieces can fall down there. Now here's another table saw. This is one out of my truck. That's the same thing. You can't, it's a little slightly bit narrower, but you can't cut anything up to there. You got to be real careful. So what I want to demonstrate now how you can cut. I'm going to take this stick here, and I'm going to cut it just 1/8 of an inch, which means that 1/8 of an inch is going to fall down there. So I'll show you how to do that. And if you need a piece only about 12 inches long, then cut one 24, and you can always cut it short later. Oh, okay. I'm going to set this saw up to cut an 1/8 inch strip here. Okay, now I got this set up for an 1/8 inch cut here, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this 1/8 inch thick. So now if you notice, this stick, it never got there. There was something here to hold it up and something here to hold it up at all times. I run through here just so I got a room to grab it here, lift it up, flip it over, and cut the rest of it. So you got a nice thin strip here. You can cut it even thinner than that. Okay, now this saw also has the same thing. It doesn't have a removable insert there. So, and set that plywood on there, and that'll give me my zero clearance there. But on some saw, this saw will work. See, I can still clamp it down, but that saw there, it wouldn't work on there. So that's why I set it up on this saw here. So now I'm going to cut some real fine strips here, about a 1/16 of an inch. Okay, so I got some different thicknesses here. This will cut about a 1/8 by or 16 by 16. This will cut a 16 by 1/4 each one. So I'm gonna, and then what I have here is, if you can see it real well, it's just a gauge here. This will go through like this. That means your work is always underneath there, and you got plenty of room for your hand. It's high enough so you don't hit the rip fence, and you can push it through like that. And it has a little thing in back here, see? I made it screws on there because you keep damaging it, and then you can just keep pushing it down until you have to make a new one. So I'm going to go ahead and cut some off this real thin strip here. If you want to make toothpicks, you have to just go round the end off. And then you can make the same thickness like that, but wider. Now let's just go to the widest one here. Now, one thing on your saw blade, always have that saw blade just enough so it cuts through the wood. I don't care about this 1/4 inch or tooth or nothing. I just want it just so I can see it coming through the wood there. So you can make them just any thickness. First of all, you make your board the thickness like that, and then you can whatever you want. It's very easy, and this thing is very easy to make too. And actually, I make it quite high to start with, because after a while, I'm going to have to cut off about 1/8 of an inch or so here, where I've been cutting, and then I can remove that. Or the whole thing is really easy to make. It's nothing but this way it keeps your hand way away from that saw. Your hand is up on top here. Your hand is actually rubbing across here. The chances of getting your hand down on your blade is almost impossible, because you have to push it. And it works really well. I cut a lot of stuff for making my model ships and that. Okay, what I want to do is I want to cut just about 1.5 inch strip off of here. I don't have an outfeed table. I took it off. So when it goes through here, of course, what am I going to do here? I can't hold it. So I come over here, I keep pushing it here. About there it balances it, so I know right by this knot here. So now I'm going to cut that far, and then I'll show you what I do next. Here's my 8-foot piece, cut very easy. I could cut dozens of them right away. Now, one thing you don't want to do is pushing this through, and most of the time when you start doing this, somebody standing over is going to start running over and grab that stick. And I said, no, don't do that, because I don't need that, because I don't know what he's going to do on that end of it. He moves it a little bit too much and bind the saw and throw the thing out, so I can do it myself real easy this way. Some guys went on a mission trip with me a while back, and they came back and said, well, what did you learn from him? I said, the first thing I learned is if he's cutting a long strip, don't grab the board. And that's true, because it's dangerous. You can do it all yourself, real easy. If you have a big outfeed table like that, you probably can run the thing all the way through. But when you're on a job site, most of the time you don't have that. Most of the time you just have the little saw here, and many times that saw is sitting right on the ground. So this is the easiest way to go right through there. Okay, I put an 8-inch blade on here because I wanted to split this 2x4, and the 7 1/4 inch just barely made it. But with an 8-inch on there, and still you don't need to go to a 10-inch. But I'm going to split this 2x4 this way. So that split it really easy. But what I didn't notice going through it, you notice it was going through it kind of hard. I was getting some timber binding in there. It was tightening up on the end here, but it still went through all right. So that's about the very, very rarely you would need a 8-inch blade. But the 8-inch blade, I think they're only in finish 60 and air, 40 and 60 tooth. And the other one there is 24 tooth, made for ripping. And this is not really made for ripping, so you notice it went a little bit too slow through there. But you can get an 8-inch regular straight rip saw if you want to. Okay, now what I'm going to show you, this is a could be a very difficult cut. I just call it an odd angle cut because I can cut it this way, wherever. So I'm just going to put a mark on here like this. See, I want this cut off like, that's where I want it to cut off. So what I do, I take another block of wood here, just so it's a little bit longer than this, and I literally bring it right up to the line here. It depends on what side I can keep it, this saw cut away from the line or right on the line. And then I just take a couple of small nails and just tack this down. Right here, angle cut, perfect. Any angle you want. You don't have to. You can't do that on a miter gauge. And anything you want on there. If it's not exactly right, you can always come back and cut a little bit more. But I call it an odd angle cut. Okay, I just want to talk to you a little bit about saw blades. The one I like the most is a 7 1/4 inch rip. Now the blades I like most is Diablo. They're made by Freud. Now there are other blades on the market, a lot of good ones. I don't know what they are because I never really experiment with them. But these are, you can get these blades in almost any brand you want. And then there's a 40 tooth, 7 1/4 inch. That's mainly for crosscut. It does not work real good on ripping. Then a 60 tooth crosscut. Again, it doesn't work good on ripping. And then a 40 tooth 8 inch. Again, a crosscut. So I always find that for ripping, this is the best one. And about 90% of your work on a table saw is usually ripping, and out in a field it's probably even more than that. So this is why I just keep this one on, and it does crosscut very, very well. Real clean. Is a few times you have to use it for that. And that's pretty much on saw blades. That, from my experience. Okay, here's just a demonstration of how much each saw, how much it cuts. The 7 1/4 inch on most saws it'll cut about 1 1/4 inch. Inch and 3/4. The 8 1/4 inch saw will cut about 2 1/8 inches, and the 10 inch one is 3 inches. But this one only makes about a 16 inch cut. This one is slightly wider, and this is about an 1/8 inch cut here. And this is probably about as big as you'll ever want to get with any saw. You can always tip it over and cut again. So this is the most versatile one because it'll still cut to a 2x4 flat, weighs inch and a half. So I just want to show that to you. Okay, you should always keep a sharp blade on a saw. Now these blades here, this costs you about $10. And if you get a dull, this blade starts getting dull, you have to start pushing on it. If you got to start pushing it hard, it's not going to cut as good, or it's going to start burning. But for $10, you can replace that blade quite often. But they do last a long time. But especially if you got kids in schools, or your son at home wants to start woodworking, put this blade on there. Start him with that, and he'll probably stay with that the rest of his life, since that's all he needs. But to start them out with a 10-inch blade on there, that's so wicked and so dangerous there. I just don't like to see that on any saw that any young people are using, or anybody else. Okay, let's put a little date on this video here. It's July 19, 2015 now. In June 3rd, 2015, I had my 84th birthday. I was born in 1931. That's when the Depression came, so we moved. I was born in Chicago. We moved up to northern Wisconsin to a little tiny town that had a sawmill, and my dad was a saw filer there. So I was one of 3 kids. I had 2 sisters and myself, so I was the only boy. So about 8 or 9 years old, I went and did some work for my uncle, and he gave me 10 cents. I don't know for how many hours it was, but anyhow, he gave me 10 cents. So I went down to a hardware store and bought 10 cents worth of nails. And I would take those nails and I'd build something. I'd pull the nails out and straighten them out and build something more. So that's when I got my start. So so that was about, so I got about 70 years operating a table saw. I started operating a table saw maybe about 13 or 14. I remember I did it all through high school and most of my life now. I don't know it works. Can't argue with success.